Good day everyone, I'm John Elbaldon and today I am going to discuss the background of the play Hamlet. So the tragedy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, often shortened to as Hamlet, is the story of a Danish prince whose uncle murders the prince's father, marries his mother and claims the throne. The prince pretends to be feeble-minded to throw his uncle off guard, then manages to kill his uncle in revenge. Shakespeare changed the emphasis of this story entirely, making his Hamlet a philosophically minded prince who delays taking action because his knowledge about his uncle's crime is so uncertain. Shakespeare went far beyond making uncertainty a personal quirk of Hamlet, introducing a number of important ambiguities into the play that even the audience cannot resolve. Like most of Shakespeare's play, Hamlet is not set in a specific year or even decade. Shakespeare does not specify in the text, and there are few context clues. Generally, Hamlet is thought to be sometime in the 1300s or 1400s. Interestingly, however, before the play begins, Hamlet returns home from his studies at the University of Wittenberg in Germany. The University of Wittenberg, which is a real university that is today called the Martin Luther University of Halle-Wittenberg, was not founded until 1502. This may indicate that the play is set a little later than most estimates claim. Alternatively, it may be a historical inconsistency on Shakespeare's part, and almost all of the action of the play takes place in and around the Elsinore Castle, so the audience does not get the chance to see the broader social environment of Denmark at that time. The play Hamlet certainly produced so many feelings, thoughts, and emotion, and as though it is a Shakespeare's tragedy, so at last all of the characters are died because of some reasons. This is the story of a man who is innocent, moral and pure by acts and emotions, but misfortune leads him towards death. The story is all about revenge, so we can say that this is a revenge play. And although the specific date of the play is unclear, the general time period is enough to provide context for the social structure that existed at that time. And it is considered as Shakespeare's longest play with 29,551 words. Hamlet is a great tragedy by William Shakespeare, one of the best tragedy among his five tragedies. We can say that Hamlet is the first tragedy among all of his best work because Hamlet stood first in all of his famous works. Hamlet also can be a subcategorized as a revenge play that is a popular genre in Elizabethan period.
Hello guys, I'm Francis Tama reporting for Time and Millennium of The Hamlet. The Hamlet was written about 1599 to 1601 and published in the Quarto edition in 1603 from the unauthorized text with reference to an early play. Shakespeare's telling of the story of Prince Hamlet was derived from several resources, notably from books 3 and 4 of Saxo Grammaticus in 12th century Danaro, and from the volume 5 of 1570 of Historias Tradiques and free translation of Saxo by Frankius de Belforest. Also, some says that the inspiration of Shakespeare's to wrote the Hamlet is because from the death of his son Hamlet tragically died at the young age of 11, and later on the death of his father.
So now we will proceed to the author of the play, which is William Shakespeare. So, yeah, biographical facts. His name is William Shakespeare. Was born on April 23, 1564 on Stratford upon Avon, and died on the same day on 1616 on the same place. His father was John Shakespeare, who is a glove maker, and his mother was Mary Arden. Shakespeare had 7 siblings. The firstborn was Joan Shakespeare, who died within few weeks of birth. Next is Margaret Shakespeare, who died after 1 year of birth. Then next came him, William, Then after him came Gilbert, then Joan, then Anne, then Richard, and Edmund. So yeah, interesting facts about William Shakespeare. Number one, despite his fame as a historical figure, there are actually very few hard facts known about him. So historians use the following primary sources to piece together his life. So number one is his works, his plays, poems, and sonnets. Second are the official records such as church and court records. And third is the commentary about him by his fellow writers like Robert Greene and Ben Jonson. So second interesting fact about William Shakespeare is that he has been credited by the Oxford English Dictionary for introducing almost 3,000 words in the English language. So estimations of his vocabulary range is 17,000 to 29,000 words. So that is at least double the number of words used by the common people. However, he only used an average of 7,000 words in his plays. Yeah. So third fact, despite our known spelling of William Shakespeare as William Shakespeare, he never actually used the spelling that we know today. Instead, as you can see in the PowerPoint, he used different spelling for his name. Yeah. So number fourth fact is that Shakespeare never published any of his plays. They are only known today because two of his fellow actors, John Hemingway and Henry Condell, recorded and published 36 of them under the name First Folio, which is the source of all Shakespeare books published. And number five, when he died, Shakespeare penned a curse for his grave, daring anyone to move his body from the final resting place. So yeah, it was good friend for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these bones, and cursed be he that moves my bones. So yeah. William Shakespeare produced a number of plays and poems in his era, as you can see in the PowerPoint. He has a lot of comedy, a lot of history, a lot of tragedy, and lots of poetry. We will now proceed to the elements of fiction of the play Hamlet. So setting. So Hamlet took place in the late Middle Ages, which is the year 13,000 to 14,099, mostly in the Palace of Elsinore in Denmark. But as it is a play, there are varying times and places where the scenes took place. So I listed them all here. If you want to read them, you can just read them in the PowerPoint. Yeah. Next, the characters. So character. The first is Hamlet. He is the protagonist of the play, and the Prince of Denmark. He is a young man in his 30s. So he is the son of King Hamlet and Queen Gertrude, the nephew turned son by Claudius. He is also the friend of Horatio, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern, and the lover of Ophelia. Throughout the play, he is full of anger and disgust against his mother's marriage to his father's murderer. He is seen as thoughtful and reflective, which led to his delayed revenge. So, However, he can also act impulsively as opposed to his reflective nature, as seen when he killed Polonius and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Claudius. So during the events of the play, Claudius is the current king of Denmark and the play's main antagonist. So he is extremely crafty and usurping, as he managed to kill his brother without anyone noticing, and then he married his brother's wife. When he felt in danger of Hamlet's madness, he sent the boy to England to be killed. However, while he is evil, he's also shown to be a fairly capable king, as seen when he stopped the young Fortinbras from attacking Denmark. Next is Gertrude. So she is the queen of Denmark and Hamlet's mother, and she is also recently married to Claudius. She loves Hamlet deeply, but she is a weak woman who seeks affection and status more urgently than moral rectitude. Yeah. And next is Polonius. He is the Lord Chamberlain of Claudius' court. Although he is a very pompous and conniving man, Polonius is a good father to his children, Laertes and Ophelia. So some articles in the internet say that he is a very selfish person and he uses his children to gain what he needed. But from my own understanding of the story, he is actually a good father. So yeah, next is Horatio. He is Hamlet's close friend and classmate at the university in Wittenberg. He is loyal and helpful to Hamlet throughout the play. And after Hamlet's death, instead of committing suicide, Horatio remains alive to tell Hamlet's story. Ophelia. Ophelia is the daughter of Polonius and the beloved of Hamlet. She's an obedient girl and rather naive. After Hamlet broke her heart and Polonius died, Ophelia became mad and drowned herself. Laertes. Laertes is Polonius' son and Ophelia's brother, and yeah, he is also a young man who spends much of the play in France. He is passionate and quick to action, unlike Hamlet, who is quite reflective. Thank you, Electric Fan. Fortinbras. He is the young Prince of Norway, whose father, the king, who is also named Fortinbras, was killed by Hamlet's father, who is also called Hamlet. Yeah. So now, Fortinbras wishes to attack Denmark to avenge his father's honor as well, take the lands taken from them. So he is another foil for Prince Hamlet. Up next is the Ghost. He is the specter of Hamlet's recently deceased father. The ghost, who claims to have been murdered by Claudius, calls upon Hamlet to avenge him. However, it is not entirely certain whether the ghost is actually King Hamlet or the devil. So yeah. Up next are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. So these two are actually one character in two persons, right? So yeah, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Hamlet's friends and schoolmates from Wittenberg. They are asked by Claudius and Gertrude to learn the cause of Hamlet's madness in exchange for money. And Hamlet saw this as treachery, so he had them killed in England. Up next is Osric. He is the foolish courtier who summons Hamlet to his duel with Laertes. Next are Voltimand and Cornelius. They are the courtiers whom Claudius sends to Norway to persuade the king of Norway to prevent Fortinbras from attacking. Finally, Marcellus and Bernardo. So they appeared in the beginning of the play. They are the officers who first see the ghost walking the ramparts of Elsinore, and they were the ones who summoned Horatio to witness it. And Marcellus is also present when Hamlet first encounters the ghost. So now we will proceed to the plot of Hamlet. So yeah, the original play was written in 29,000 words, so it was pretty difficult for me to summarize it. So yeah, I divided the play by its parts so that you guys can understand it more. So yeah, Act 1. The scene starts on a dark winter night outside the castle of Elsinore in Denmark. The guards, Marcellus and Bernardo, together with Prince Hamlet's friend Horatio, exchange shifts with Francisco. The guards urge Horatio to stay because they saw King Hamlet's ghost for the past 2 nights. Horatio does not believe them, but the apparition suddenly reveals itself and then disappears. So yeah, terrified, the prince's friend acknowledges that it indeed resembled the dead king of Denmark, even wearing the armor he wore during the battle against Norway, as well as the frown when he fought against the Poles. Horatio then concludes that the ghost was some sort of evil omen, perhaps a military invasion, seeing that the young Fortinbras, son of the deceased king of Norway, whom King Hamlet killed in battle, was planning to reclaim the lands taken from them. The apparition appears once more, and Horatio tries conversing with it, but it disappears as dawn breaks. Horatio suggests that they tell the events to Prince Hamlet. Meanwhile, in the palace court, Claudius, the new king of Denmark, is holding a speech. He is thanking everyone's support to the death of King Hamlet, his ascension to the throne, and his marriage to Gertrude, who is the former king's wife and Prince Hamlet's mother. Claudius also mentions that the young Fortinbras has been sending letters demanding reclaiming the lands that Norway lost to Denmark. Claudius then dispatches Voltimand and Cornelius to send letters to the boy's uncle, the new king of Norway, so that Fortinbras would stop. The speech is then concluded. The king then turns to Laertes, the son of the Lord Chamberlain Polonius, and asks what he wants, to which the boy answered that he wanted to return to France to continue studying. Polonius, after being asked by the king, gave his son permission. Claudius then turns to Prince Hamlet, asking why the clouds still hang upon him. Gertrude follows up, asking her son why he is still wearing mourning clothes. Hamlet replied that the sorrow he felt was so great that his appearance was only a poor mirror of it. The king consoles the boy and gives an advice in a fatherly manner. And husband and wife encourage Hamlet that he should stay and not leave for Wittenberg, where the boy had been going to school before his father's death. Hamlet obeys. Alone, Hamlet cries that he wants to die, resenting that God made suicide a sin. Hamlet points out his disgust to the inappropriate and incestuous marriage between his mother and uncle. He lamented how his mother could move on in less than 2 months when the love between his father and mother seemed so great. How could such a great person be forgotten that past and be replaced by someone so inferior? His monologue was interrupted when Horatio entered, followed by the 2 guards. The 2 friends greeted each other. The newcomers then recount what happened that evening, and Hamlet is amazed and decides to keep watch that evening, hoping to see the apparition. In the house of Polonius, Laertes bids his sister Ophelia goodbye as he departs for France. He tells her to not fall in love with Prince Hamlet as the gap between their statuses is too great. Ophelia promises to keep his words in her heart. Polonius enters, telling his son to hurry, although delaying him by giving some fatherly advice about morals and customs. Laertes takes his word to heart and leaves. Polonius then gives the same speech Laertes gave to Ophelia. Ophelia defends the prince by saying that his confession of love was sincere. Polonius forbids the girl to see Prince Hamlet anymore. Ophelia obeys. Evening has arrived and Hamlet accompanies Horatio and Marcellus in the watch. Sounds of celebration emanated from the castle after midnight. Hamlet comments his distaste, saying that the king's actions are making Denmark a laughingstock among the other nations. The ghost suddenly appears and beckons Hamlet to come closer. The other two try to stop Hamlet, but the prince breaks free. The 2 follow the prince, with Marcellus saying that something is rotten in Denmark. In the dark of the night, the ghost finally speaks and claims to be King Hamlet. He reveals that he had not been bitten by a snake in his sleep as the whole Denmark believes, but that his brother poured poison in his ear. King Hamlet then exhorts his son to take revenge for killing him, for corrupting Denmark, and for seducing his wife. However, King Hamlet adamantly tells Hamlet that he should not harm his mother and let her suffer from the judgment of heaven and the pangs of her own guilt. Dawn then breaks and the ghost disappears. Horatio and Marcellus catch up, but Hamlet does not tell them what the ghost said. The prince made the 2 men swear by his sword not to tell anybody what they had seen. Also disclosed that he may pretend to be a madman in the future and the 2 should not give the slightest hint that they know about his motives. 3 times, the ghost urges the 2 to swear. Terrified, Horatio and Marcellus comply. Act 2. Polonius sends his manservant Rinaldo to spy on Laertes on France. As Rinaldo goes away, Ophelia enters and tells her father about the strange behavior of Prince Hamlet. Polonius listens and presumes that the prince was mad with love. Meanwhile, in the palace court, King Claudius orders Hamlet's 2 school friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, to spy on the prince. The queen assures that it was for the good of Hamlet and that she will pay the two with lots of money. The pair agrees and sets off immediately. Polonius enters the scene, saying that he knows what caused the change in Prince Hamlet, but will elaborate further after the two ambassadors sent to Norway return. After exits, Gertrude still insists that the cause of Hamlet's strange behavior are the previous king's death and her hasty marriage to Claudius. Polonius returns with Voltimand and Cornelius. The pair says that the King of Norway was able to convince his nephew Fortinbras to stop the Denmark invasion. In return, however, he asked that Denmark provide some assistance for Fortinbras' campaign against Poland, that Claudius should allow the young boy to pass Denmark on his way to Poland. As the two leave, Polonius then asserts, after a very lengthy introduction, that Prince Hamlet was mad with love. Gertrude is indignant, but the Chamberlain then reveals a confiscated love letter to his daughter by the prince's hand. Polonius claims that since Ophelia had been forbidden to do anything related to the prince, Hamlet became mad. Polonius then suggests that he and Claudius hide behind an arras so they can eavesdrop on the couple when Ophelia meets with the prince to return his love gifts. Claudius agrees just as Hamlet comes in reading a book. Polonius sends the king and queen away so he can talk to the prince himself. The old man and Hamlet converse, with Hamlet firing mild insults in his crazy talk. Polonius, clearly bewildered, was only able to focus when Hamlet finally mentioned his daughter. He takes this as confirmation that the lad was crazy with love, even secretly admitting that he was near Hamlet's state once in his youth. Hamlet leaves after a few more exchange of words, successful in his plan of having Polonius think he is indeed mad. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern then meet the prince, but he immediately figures out that they were sent by Claudius and Gertrude. Hamlet then spouts deep words again. Rosencrantz takes this opportunity to announce that there are a bunch of actors headed in the castle, to which Hamlet's mood shifts once more. The actors arrive and the pair goes away. After a brief performance of Aeneid inside the castle, Hamlet instructs Polonius to prepare the lodging of the guests. After the old man leaves, he tells the group that they will perform the murder of Gonzago, but with the addition of 12 to 16 original lines that Hamlet made himself. He then reveals that it will reenact the exact murder scene as told by the ghost and see if Claudius reacts to the scene. Act 3. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern report to the king that they were unable to find the cause of the prince's madness, although he seemed to be excited about the actors in the palace. Claudius and Gertrude were happy to know this and promised to attend the play that evening. The pair and Gertrude were dismissed as the king and Polonius will spy on the stage meeting between Ophelia and Hamlet. Hamlet arrives reciting his famous to be or not to be soliloquy. He says that the trials of life are too great for anyone to willingly bear, and that we only do it because we are afraid of death and what happens next. Ophelia then meets him, giving him back the gifts he sent her. Hamlet denies this and claims that he both loved her once and never loved her at all. He says other mean things, then leaves the poor girl dumbstruck and crestfallen. The two fathers get out of their hiding place. Claudius says that the prince's behavior is not caused by love and did not resemble madness. He declares to send Hamlet to England for a change of pace and scenery. Polonius agrees to this, although still convinced that Hamlet was mad with love. Claudius asks Polonius to spy on Hamlet after the play, when his mother will talk to him. That evening, in the castle hall which serves as a theater, Hamlet lectures the players on how to act the part given to them and asks Polonius, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern to assist. Horatio arrives and Hamlet tells him to watch the king's reaction while he pretends insanity again. The play started and the actors acted out the play according to the prince's instruction. Throughout, Hamlet was doing a live commentary on the characters and teasing Ophelia with sexual puns. As they move on to the scene where the murderer pours poison to the king's ear, Claudius cries for light and flees. The palace is in chaos and the play is halted. Left alone, Horatio and Hamlet are convinced that Claudius was guilty. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern arrive and tell Hamlet that the queen was waiting in her chambers. Hamlet replies that he wishes to be alone. Elsewhere in the castle, Claudius asks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to take Hamlet to England immediately. As the pair leaves, Polonius enters, reminding his plan to hide in the queen's chambers. Polonius leaves, and the king repents for his sin in prayer, although he is not yet ready to give up the throne to Gertrude. Hamlet slips by quietly and plans to kill Claudius then and there. However, he hesitates, realizing that Claudius will go to heaven if he dies while praying. As he leaves, Claudius gets up, saying that his prayer was insincere. As the prince storms inside his mother's chambers, Gertrude chastises him for offending his father, Claudius. Hamlet replies that his mother offended his true father by marrying Claudius. His anger was so intense, Gertrude cries out. Polonius, hiding behind the arras, calls for help. Thinking it was Claudius, Hamlet stabs through the tapestry. He realizes it was Polonius and calls the innocent man an intruding fool. Hamlet continues denouncing his mother until his father's ghost appears again. The dead king reminds Hamlet of his mission. Gertrude, not seeing the ghost, believes his son to be mad. The prince tries his best to convince his mother that he has been feigning madness all along and urges her to forsake Claudius. He pleads her not to tell anyone what she just heard, and Gertrude, still shaken from her son's actions, agreed. Hamlet then drags Polonius' body away. Act 4. The next day, Gertrude hurries to Claudius and tells him that her son was as mad as the sea in the wind when both contend which is mightier, and that he killed Polonius. The king was horrified, and wonders out loud how he will be able to handle this crisis without tarnishing his reputation. He tells Gertrude that Hamlet must be shipped immediately to England at once, and find a way to explain his deed to the court and to the people. He calls Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, tells them about the murder, and sends them to find Hamlet. Elsewhere in Elsinore, Hamlet just finished disposing of the body of Polonius. The pair arrive, asking where he put the body. Feigning offense, he accuses the two as spies in the service of Claudius before accompanying them to the king. Inside the palace, Claudius asks Hamlet where the body is. Hamlet replies that Polonius is being eaten by worms, and the king could send a messenger to see the old man in heaven or meet him in hell himself. However, the lad finally admits that the body is under the stairs in the lobby. The king dispatches his attendants there and tells Hamlet to go to England immediately with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. As he is left alone, Claudius hopes that England will obey the letter he sent with the prince's two companions, which is to put Hamlet to death. On a nearby plain near Denmark, young Fortinbras orders a captain to go to the palace of Elsinore to ask for permission to go to Poland. Hamlet and his companions encounter the captain on the way. He asks why the Norse want to fight the Poles, to which the man answers that they will fight over a patch of land that has no profit in it but the name. Hamlet was astonished by how humans could sacrifice their lives over something so insignificant and with little gain. He compares this to the importance of his mission, yet he still fails to act. Disgusted by his own failure, he vows to only think of bloody thoughts onwards. Gertrude and Horatio discuss Ophelia, who had reportedly gone mad. The girl enters, adorned with flowers and singing strange songs. Claudius comes to the scene and comments that the girl's state was due to her father's death, and that the people of Denmark were disturbed as well. He also mentions that Laertes has sailed back from France. A loud noise thundered somewhere in the castle. Laertes had come in rage, together with a mob of commoners saying, "Laertes shall be king." Claudius pacifies him, saying that the lad should calm down and hear his version of the events, so that he could bring proper justice to his father's death. Laertes concedes. In another part of the castle, Horatio reads Hamlet's letter given by sailors, which states that their ship had been captured by pirates, returned him to Denmark. He escorts the sailors to the king and queen too, as directed by the prince, then follows them to find Hamlet in a council tried near the castle. Meanwhile, Claudius and Laertes have been discussing the death of Polonius and pointed that it was all Hamlet's fault, although the king explained the boy was unharmed since the queen and the people loved him too much. A messenger enters and informs the two that Hamlet had returned, much to Laertes' delight since his revenge will not be delayed. Claudius then devises a clever plan to dispose of Hamlet without any appearance of foul play. He recommends that Laertes should challenge the prince to a duel, where he will use a poisoned rapier so that even a scratch will be fatal. Claudius also mentions a backup plan, in case all else fails, where he will give a poisoned wine to Hamlet after the match. Suddenly, Gertrude enters with tragic news. Ophelia died from drowning. Laertes is grief-stricken, having lost his sister so soon after his father's death. He then storms out of the room. Act 5. In the churchyard, two grave diggers are digging for the grave of Ophelia. The two talk about philosophical things until Hamlet arrives with Horatio. The prince asks one gravedigger whose grave he digs, and demands first verbally. First saying that it's his own since he's the one digging it, second that it belongs to nobody since the body is dead, and third finally saying that it belongs to a dead woman. Hamlet picks up a skull, and the gravedigger tells him that it belongs to Yorick, who is King Hamlet's jester. Appalled, the prince tells Horatio that he knows about Yorick, then proceeds to give a speech about people turning to dust someday, even great men like Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great. Suddenly, the funeral procession for Ophelia arrives, including Claudius, Gertrude, and Laertes. Hamlet, hiding in the bushes with Horatio, recognizes that the funeral is made, indicating that the dead took his or her own life. As Ophelia is laid down on the earth, Hamlet finally recognizes that it was her who died. At the same time, Laertes gets angry with the priest, saying that to give his sister a proper Christian burial would profane the dead. He leaps into Ophelia's grave to hold her once again in his arms. Hamlet reveals himself, then leaps into the grave in agonized fury, declaring that he loved Ophelia so much. The two men fight, and are separated just as quickly by the people. The king and queen declare Hamlet as mad, and they storm off with Horatio. Claudius tells Laertes to be patient and to remember their plan. The next day, Hamlet tells Horatio that he replaced the letter sent to England with another one that orders the execution of Rosencrantz in Guildenstern instead of his. He says that he feels no sympathy for the two traitors, although he felt guilty about his hostility for Laertes. They are interrupted by Osric, a courtier who overly flatters the prince and tells him that Laertes invites him to the duel. Against Horatio's advice, Hamlet agrees to fight. In the hall, the prince asks Laertes for forgiveness, saying that he did not willingly kill Polonius. Laertes answers that he will not forgive him just yet, but still accepts Hamlet's offer of love. As they select their foils, or blunt swords, for fencing, Claudius proclaims that if Hamlet wins the first or second hit, he will drink to Hamlet's health, then throw in the cup a valuable gem, which is actually the poison, and give the wine for Hamlet to drink. The duel begins. Hamlet strikes Laertes but refuses to drink, saying that he will play another hit first. He hits Laertes again, and Gertrude, overjoyed by her son's performance, drinks from the cup despite Claudius not telling her to. Laertes murmurs to himself that to wound Hamlet with the poisoned sword goes against his conscience, but when they fight again, he finally inflicts a slash to the prince. They scuffle, and in the confusion, change swords. Hamlet then unknowingly wounds his opponent with a poisoned blade. Gertrude falls, claiming the drink to be poisoned. She calls out to Hamlet one last time, then dies. Laertes, realizing his mistake, hastily tells Hamlet that the blade was poisoned too, and it was all Claudius' fault. Hamlet is furious and runs the king with a poisoned sword, then forces him to drink the rest of the poisoned wine. Claudius dies begging for help. Laertes forgives Hamlet before passing away, and the prince, knowing his death is close, beckons Horatio to not take his own life despite the tragic events, and instead proclaim Hamlet's story to the world. He also states that Fortinbras shall be made the new king of Denmark, then dies. Fortinbras, returning after a successful war from the Poles, arrives at the palace hall and sees the carnage. Horatio comes up to him and says that he will tell everything that led to the gruesome scene. Fortinbras orders for Hamlet to be carried away like a soldier. The end. Next, we will proceed to the language used in the play. So, yeah, obviously the play was written in English, but it is deep English that can make a common man's vocabulary look like a preschooler's in comparison. So, Shakespeare used a variety of techniques in writing Hamlet, but it was the profundity of his words that made reading and understanding it very, very hard. Yeah. Like all Shakespearean plays, Hamlet is a combination of verse, which is 25% here, and prose, which is 75% here in the play. Yeah. Next, Shakespeare is famous for using iambic pentameter in his poems and plays, and Hamlet is no exception. Iambic pentameter is like a heart beating. One soft syllable followed by a loud syllable repeated 5 times, like badum, 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 badum. So yeah. Example, here. The lady does protest too much methinks, which is the line of Gertrude. Finally, another technique used was the frequent use of antithesis. Hamlet would often compare life and death, sins and God, etc. Finally, we will proceed to the themes of the play. So yeah, the first theme is revenge. So it is very pervasive throughout the play. Three characters, in fact, Hamlet, Fortinbras, and Laertes, want to exact revenge due to different reasons, and they all fail in one way or another. For one, Hamlet wants to avenge his father's murder, but he delays, and when he finally does it, everyone else dies. So yeah, Fortinbras wants to reclaim their country's lost land, but is stopped by his uncle. And finally, Laertes wants to avenge his father and sister's death, but was killed in the process, yeah, dragging the royal family with him. Up next is death and mortality. So yeah, the theme of death starts very early in the play, with the ghost of King Hamlet appearing before the guards and Horatio. Then, throughout the play, Hamlet ponders over the mortality of human life, especially in his to be or not to be soliloquy. And in the last scene, every major character except Horatio is dead. Third is religion. Religion is not a major theme, but is still a very important one. There are many events influenced by Christianity in the play, like Hamlet's refusal to king a praying Claudius, and he also did not commit suicide because it was against God's law, despite his disgust towards his mother's sin and uncle's sin. So yeah. The ghost also mentioned that his spirit was being burned by flames to cleanse his life's sin, which is a reference for the existence of purgatory. And the influence of religion can also be noticed in the customs of the people, particularly in Ophelia's funeral. So yeah, Hamlet notices the strangeness of the procession, meaning that the funeral of a believer and sinner is different. Laertes also comments that having a Christian burial for his sister would profane the dead. Finally, madness. It is one of the most prominent themes in the play. Upon learning his father's murder, he proceeds to pretend madness so that Claudius doesn't suspect him. In the process, Hamlet hurts Ophelia's feelings, accidentally kills Polonius, and causes Ophelia to be truly mad and take her own life. Hamlet displays many sides of his personality, appearing as a sage sometimes, a philosopher, a madman, and a lecher on different occasions and towards different people. Claudius' suspicion after the play was triggered, making his plan fail midway. I, on the other hand, still fail to comprehend if Hamlet was truly insane or was just pretending.
History and style of Hamlet. Style in Hamlet frequently function as an extension of character. The way characters speak give us insight in how they think. This observation is especially true for Hamlet himself, who speaks more than one-third of the play's total lines and whose linguistic style changes often, rapidly depending on context. So Hamlet is at his most philosophical when he delivers the monologue that begins to be or not to be. This monologue continues for nearly 35 lines in which Hamlet pontificates on the suffering inherent in existence and considers the pros and cons of committing suicide. So the gravity of his subject matter and the philosophical weight of his diction reveal the heavy burden of sad Sicarius from the very beginning of the play. Spiritual value of Hamlet. So Hamlet wears black to decorate the celebration in the room of state in the castle of Elsinore. His motives for this are spiritual in nature. So the intellectual value of Hamlet is that suggests the moral value of the woman occurred in the text of Hamlet. The first um, soliloquy or act of talking to oneself, whether silently or aloud, occurs when the hero is left alone after the royal social gathering. His first soliloquy emphasizes two religious moral themes: the corruption of the world and the frailty of woman. That's for spiritual value.
Next, for other literary merits, is emotional. Hamlet is a play that depicts about conspiracy, deception, and tragic consequences that shows impulsiveness and indecision. It also tackles about the depths of its protagonist and decisiveness that leads to tragic consequences. That all throughout reading the play, you'll ask yourself of what should he do, who can be trusted, and what role might he play in the course of justice? Questions that complicated by a tangled web of characters, por- forcing Hamlet negotiate friends, family, court counselors, and love interest, who many possesses ulterior motives. As he is an overthinker, or maybe we can call depressive or having some psychological problem in today's world, it affects him a lot as all throughout the play he kept on thinking things. That as he spends much of the play facing inward and often fails to see the destruction left in his wake. Hamlet also particularly cruel to Ophelia, his love interest that brought madness to the prince. Her fate couldn't been easily avoided. That shows Hamlet's toxic mind games. Other underlying issues present at play that can be possibly associated on also on its emotional values or are when Ophelia's father overlooked Hamlet's actions as a mere love sickness. Mistaken identity leads to bloodshed that lives of uncomfortable knowledge that tragedy involves from human error. That even some of our mistakes is leaving things undecided. That as you read it, you'll realize Hamlet's humanity and question yourself who he truly is and might be. Is he a noble son avenging his father, or a mad prince creating courtly chaos? Or courtly chaos. That sounds like crime and punishment. That should he act or observe, doubt or trust? That in the line to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether this nobler in the mind to suffer the sling and arrows of outrageous fortune, or take against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. A sample monologue or a monologue that personifies Hamlet's existential dilemma. Thoughts and actions that enabling him to choose between life and death. Next is permanence. The character depicts as hunted by the past and immobilize his future. The play is an odd sort of tragedy lacking either the abrupt brutality or all-consuming romance that characterizes Shakespeare's other work in the genre. As Shakespeare uses introspective languages, symbolism, melancholic monologues or soliloquy that creates breathtaking effects that exemplified Hamlet's declaration of angst and other emotions. That as you read the Hamlet, you will see that the real essence lies in the power of his tragedy and its mind-bending plot. That when you started the play and don't finish it, you can't really distinguish the flow of the play well because of his endless questioning that raises another questions after questions that raises another anxiety. Last is universality. The character of Hamlet is considered to be one of the most human characters Shakespeare ever written and in literature because Hamlet is for all type of age that as reader reads it, they will gather and equip necessary information that will really help them enjoy and appreciate its fullness to the brim of its themes and underlying messages.
For the thematic relevance, the play Hamlet by William Shakespeare approximately 400 years ago remains relevant to the contemporary world due to its philosophical contemplations of the human condition and what it is to be human. Hamlet explores the transience of life and the consequences of madness as in regard to suicidal tendencies and whether it is good to be or not to be. Shakespeare integrates the concept of revenge tragedy as a factor Hamlet is renowned for, and the physical and psychological obstacle, such as deceit one must conquer in their ultimate search for the truth, elements which remain pertinent to society today. Hamlet provides a lens to view some of life's greatest challenges and hardest moments. But it also recognizes our strength in being able to keep going and find tactics to deal with those challenges life throws at us. Shakespeare's Hamlet provides life lessons through the use of common themes and the present people's everyday life. Shakespeare provides readers with a lesson about our actions by using real life vices and problems in Hamlet, also showing us possible outcome of this. Many themes and motifs in Shakespeare's Hamlet has a parallel issue that are relevant in our current society, such as revenge, deception, and mental health, and many more. Revenge appears to be the most notable theme that reflects both Hamlet and current society. Throughout the play, readers are able to understand that revenge plays a large part of what drives Hamlet along with the play. He is driven heavily by his powerful desire of avenging his father's death. Furthermore, our current society is fascinated with revenge and twists it into their own interpretations. It makes the people think that revenge is fulfilling and it is the only end goal. Hamlet disputes these common thoughts of revenge with a more realistic case, when Hamlet's case of revenge ends up being bittersweet achievement that has obtained with a large cost. Shakespeare's Hamlet depicts the hero as a representation to mankind, blinded by lust for revenge, that eventually leads him astray towards evil. Consequently, everything around Hamlet becomes destroyed as well as shows that revenge is not sweet, in fact destructive and toxic. This parallels our current society when people seek their own forms of revenge in search for the sweet ending they think will obtain, but instead cause nothing but more pain. Deception also plays a large part of Hamlet because every character is affected by deception in some way which also resembles modern society. The play highlights the serious consequences that deception can have on relationship and other people. Lies is a form of deception as we see in Hamlet, and it have just as much impact on people as the play warns. At some point of our lives, we have told a lie, and whenever it is a big lie or a small lie, it affected someone else around us. Many people in our society can relate to this story and they learn one way or another that lies and deception is only destructive and hurtful. Shakespeare warns readers through Hamlet about the impact of deception and the consequences it can have.